Well, again, we did Starcraft as a trial last year. We added it at the end of the year, in a large part to make up for what we saw was going to be a deficiency around World of Warcraft. Blizzard is an organization that we've worked well with, and our relationship has gotten much, much stronger in the last year. But we never had the intention of going to Brood War, right? It was out there. There was a history around it. It was established and it worked. But what we were really hoping for was that moment when we were going to get our hands on StarCraft 2. And when we did, when we got the beta access, we saw what everyone else now sees, right? We knew it, but we knew that we were going to have to take baby steps. Last year's budgets were fully baked when we added those two little events. With the benches and no audio and the terrible. I mean, it was, it was awful. But by adding it, what we showed was that we were going to make room for it so that we could have the negotiations with Blizzard around this year. The game, again, even with how terrible I am at it, the game it's something about it. Like if you get it, you get it. And it broadcasts really well. So we knew that was going to be something that was either going to be a lightning strike for us and be a huge growth opportunity, or that we were going to be an also-ran, meaning that we didn't invest enough and somebody else outdid us. I chose very early on last year, I guess it would be early, at the end of last year, beginning of this year, to really invest in it and to make it the focal point. And then we had that first event of this year, which was obviously a struggle. But in a weird way, it's the best thing that could have happened to us because it allowed me to go back and invest even more into it. And so that we were able to get to the place where we are right now, with what you see out there with the Korean exchange program, with all the players who are over from Europe, with the Global Invitational, the tournament inside of a tournament that we did. We saw the potential in it. I think we're still realizing some of it. I think there's more out there, but it definitely was something that we looked at immediately and knew could be huge. Well, I think from a forecasting standpoint of audience, we've done well. But we focus on it because it's a good metric to talk about how many people are watching at one time or how many uniques. And I think that, again, it's a challenge because people forget that this is still an investment year for us, meaning that we're putting money into the space. I think everybody is, right? You look at some of the other organizations that are out there. I can tell you right now, nobody's making boatloads of money off of this activity yet. But what we've done is we've gotten to a place where 175 countries can tune into our live stream and do. That's the same as the Super Bowl from a broadcast perspective. It's not apples to apples because it's the internet versus TV, but I'll take it, right? Because then what I can do is I can make a more compelling argument for the sales efforts around that for next year. And that's not just the sponsorship stuff. That's the advertising side. So, the numbers are where I had hoped they would be. But in my mind, I'm crazy enough to think that we can do better. I'm crazy enough to think that 500,000 people can watch at one time. Just because it's never been done doesn't mean it won't happen. We had League of Legends open up today. 90,000 people watching this morning. The minute we flipped it on. That's crazy for that game. And then you have StarCraft, and then you've got Halo, you've got the Call of Duty. So I think everything has been really encouraging, and the numbers have. I stopped focusing on them, I guess, is the kind of sad answer to that question, is because we just need to continue building, and I think that it's more about realizing the full potential of it. There's 34 million people playing League of Legends, over 4 million playing StarCraft 2. It's a percentage game to a certain degree. So we're never going to get 10 million people watching StarCraft 2, but we don't need that yet. In 10 years, maybe we do, but right now we don't. Right now what we need to do is just do the best job of over-serving those communities, but also threading it all together, right? So, but yeah, I'll be watching the numbers this week, and I think we could do, between YouTube, Twitch, and our other distribution partners, I think we could do 300,000 people concurrently. I think we should. If we don't, I'll be disappointed. Sorry. I'm sorry. It's true. Well, I think what we've realized is that so our structure that we have, especially because there was a dramatic change which happened with the Koreans joining. So our structure rewards people based on performance. But the events are so far apart there's no way in between those events for you to change your position. That's not good, right? So 6 events, 3 days, 18 days. So 18 days out of the year, you've got this greatness, right? And each one's bigger than the last. So somewhere in between that and a world where there's just a complete oversaturation, which we don't want either. So not enough, too much, but somewhere there's a sweet spot where people are playing, maybe in shorter runs, maybe the season structure next year changes with slightly smaller. Sorry, I'm not supposed to talk about it yet, but where you've got multiple instances, right, where people can play for their position, right? So if you think about European football, for example, right, the teams on the bottom in the top division they lose their opportunity to stay there. Someone replaces them, and you need a structure where you're rewarded, like the Code S, Code A type stuff, but where there's more of it, right, and it's more meaningful for these players. So I think the biggest thing we've learned is that the structure that we had built was great for a circuit tour, but in terms of seasonal play, there needs to be a dramatic shift where it makes more sense for the players. There's more meaningful games and there's more content available, because nothing beats this. Nothing beats people in the room cheering for their favorite player, being able to watch it live at home. It's all comes down to these moments. So we need to create more of them. Well, I think, don't get me wrong, there are knowledgeable women in the community, without a doubt, and there's some good players. We saw someone play on our stream last night. We've talked about, we've had opportunities to potentially work with people, and we've had female hosts in the past, but for us, it's really, the gender question that's not the qualification isn't based on gender for us. And I'm not saying that we won't eventually have someone that will work with even female casters one day, but right now, for what we have available and for the type of work that we're doing, the people who are applying for the job and the people that we're looking at happen to be male. If I had 15 people submitting, clips and resumes around, doing this work who were female, I'd look at them, but we just don't. And we're not going to take somebody from another world and transport them in and try and just force it. It's not genuine. Look, eye candy works to a degree, but I think you've got to have substance first, and so we're focusing on that. Well, I think I know Carmac. We've talked about some of this in the past around the casters and kind of the position they have. The challenge is that for a league to succeed, it needs stars, right? And so the qualifications of being a star, a certain degree of charisma, hopefully some talent, right? But not everybody fits the bill in traditional sports or in esports. There are some guys who are the best players in traditional sports who never want to do interviews. They're very private people. They're not comfortable in front of cameras. And so those guys tend to be the ones that they come out, they have a great game, and then you don't hear from, they're very private. We're unfortunately in a position where we're still in our, this is our kind of golden age. We're still, crawling along trying to figure out our way. So the players have to take as much of a role. I mean, we've made stars. Here's the crazy thing. We've had one of our Halo players is on 185 million bottles of Dr. Pepper a couple of years ago. A lot of guys on this side of it don't know about it because we were only doing console at the time, right? We'll do that. But the thing is the structure here is a little bit different too, right? You've got the Teamliquids, you've got the complexity, you've got the evil geniuses. So you have people who are managing these players and working with these players. In the past, we used to do media training. We used to pay for it for players. But the reality is that the investment of time and money in that, it was too much. We can't do it for everybody who's out there. So there are going to be some people who are not going to be seen the same light. Now on the caster side, though, these are your presenters, right? They're talking when there's no game going on. So they've got to be charming. They've got to be charismatic. They've got to be comfortable in front of a camera. And you know what? The reality is that the community embraces them because they see them, they're the ones they see, and they're just they love them. It's crazy. There's a tremendous amount of respect that goes out for, Tastosis and Day 9 and Husky. And they deserve it. They do deserve it. But I think you run that risk, again, of the overshadowing. So finding a balancing point is going to come out. But again, the other side of it is, guess what? You see the casters more than you see the players, right? Because we only have 6, for us, I'm not going to talk about anybody, but we have 6 events, right? So for 18 days, those guys are casting all day long. You're only seeing Tyler, in a couple of matches, right? So we need more competition. We need more of the players playing, more of the players talking. And some of them will want to, and some of them won't. But the ones who do will I think, shine and rise to the top. So, but I disagree to an extent with Carmac's comment about the casters being bigger stars. I think it's just it's kind of an incendiary point because some of these casters, they do have a bit of an ego, and some of them have certain asks and wants. But I think they've earned a lot of that. Maybe not everything they want, but again, so the players have to, and the teams need to take a little bit of responsibility around how they're going to frame these guys out, how they're going to put them out there. And I think some of you do it really well. I think others could use some help, and I want to, I want to address that. I want to look at how to work with the teams to do that. Because for example, we've got a ton of footage that's being shot here. Hand it off to the team so you can make B-roll packages around your players. Because again, that's only going to help. Getting stuff out there that's going to be, getting stuff with substance out to the community is only going to help with the players becoming bigger stars. So we want to help that. So the Starcraft space, there's a lot of personalities out there on the team side, and every team has kind of its own way of operating, and it's not like a traditional sport where there's a set number of teams and they all have revenue streams around gate and they've got the concessions again, right? You guys have, some of you have websites, some of you don't, some of you do content that gets a lot of views, some of you have the live streaming. So understanding the challenges of each of the teams is part of the hard work, because they're each different, right? So our ability to predict what's going to be a hot button issue with the teams is difficult. It's hard to nail, right? So what we have to do is spend the time, sit down, have conversation, have an open dialogue, and really be respectful and mindful of what each of the entities are looking for. And again, for us, it's not good for us if the teams implode. It's not good for us if the teams don't have an opportunity to generate revenue around their activities. It's also not good for us if we are held hostage. So it's finding that balance and kind of losing some of the, I guess the best way to look at it would be, we've got to get to a place where we're partners, right? Where we've identified the teams and organizations who are coming to every event, who are spending against this activity, and find a way to help them. But again, what actually makes a team a team? Who do we talk to? Where does the list end? Is there different classifications of teams? These are all things that are challenging. And I'm hoping to work with the team owners and to the staffers to figure out a structure that's going to be mutually beneficial and a true partnership. And I think we've got the first big piece of that figured out for next year. Well, we have an incredibly talented and hardworking PR department of one, Katie Goldberg, and she's, it's been in the game space, it's been in traditional media space, and it's done an amazing job of it's all about relationships, right? So you ignite the conversation, and then you try and get somebody excited, and so they see the potential and get them to the event, because once they come to the event, they want to do an article, they want to do a piece, right? So I think the big thing for us is just to understand that it takes time, right? The worst thing in the world would be if everybody in America suddenly turned their eyes to us and we were not prepared. We didn't have our shit together, right? So what you've got to do is you've got to be careful what you ask for, because these guys, you get one shot, right? So USA Today is asking to do a cover story. That sounds great, but what are we going to talk about? What's the focus going to be? Where's that lead? How does this help moving us forward? Because we've had, again, in our history, we've had articles in ESPN, the magazine. We've been on ESPN. We've been on the USA Network. We've been on G4. There's been more of it than anyone really realizes, unless you've been a fan of the league, of Major League Gaming for all 8 years, right? You've really seen where we've gone. I think the key to it is that, again, what we talked about earlier, the players, you need to have a star, right? You need to have that person that you're going to say, if someone calls you and says, what player do you want us to talk to? You've got to have one you say, I'll push him out there right now. Right? Who is that? What are they going to say? Are they going to say the right things? Are they going to be someone who's an ambassador, an evangelist for what we do? And that's what we really need, right? And again, some players are better than others. Some players don't realize that when they're live streaming at home and they're throwing words around, that those stick, right? And some get it. Some play the game really well, and they have their private persona and their public persona figured out. And hopefully they're very close to being the same. But again, this is the challenge, is that the media lens is a very critical one. And not everybody out there is going to love esports, but guess what? That's fine. They don't need to. It's not about converting the masses. I really do not believe that our goal should be to go and get 100% of the video game playing population to love esports. I think the goal should be to build a structure that will scale, so that in 4 years, all the kids who are 12 years old right now, when they're 4 years older and 16 and can drive a car and can get on a plane, are coming here rather than bugging their mom and dad to drive them. And then 4 years later, the kids who are 8 right now are in that same position. It's just, we'll grow into our skin. Right? We'll get to that size. We'll get to that scale where we are a mass media platform. But it's not going to happen by converting people. It's going to be by the generational shifts of people just coming into the world and not knowing a world without this. So yeah, but I think, and with that comes more mainstream coverage. We've had a lot of reporters here this weekend from more traditional media outlets, whether it be TV or web or print. Well, I think the big challenge is I need to create a platform where it makes sense for these guys to put the time in. Right? The Koreans aren't traveling around running to every event that goes on. The majority of them. Some do. Some are more actively out there, and you'll see them competing in Europe. You'll see them competing outside of Korea. Obviously, they're coming to our events because our events are great. And, rah MLG, but especially this one with the big prize pool, it just makes sense. But again, the other reason it makes sense is because as a global media platform, we have bigger distribution than anybody else. Right, and I'm not just talking about the eyeballs of the live stream, because it's not that. It's the whole thing. The YouTube deal, the IMG stuff that we've got. So for us, it is a double-edged sword, and I don't know that we would, going into next year, that you'll see the same league exchange program structure. What I can tell you is that what we have to figure out is a way for the American players. So focusing on Starcraft 2, think about the regional servers. Now think about if you can find the best players who play locally on those servers and give them an ecosystem, right, and within which they can compete. Then bringing them together, then having more of these. Like, it's got to shift so that being the best in North America is a meaningful thing, and that's identified, and then that there's also the global component. So what we need to do here is build a platform where it makes sense for the North American player to put in as much time as the folks in Southeast Asia, for the European player to put in as much time as the guys that you see coming over here doing so well. It should not be that it's a long shot, or it's Huck is beating the odds, or that everybody just assumes that the Koreans are going to run the table. It should be that the platform is equally attractive here, so that you see the same practice regimen come up, you see the same skill plateau reached. Because again, I don't think the best Starcraft 2 player in the world has even touched the game yet. Right? I'll be honest with you. There's probably a 12-year-old kid out there who's going to tear shit up in a couple of years. But if we build something where he says he sees it, and he's like, and that if we're the reason that kid picks up the game, that'd be amazing. Again, because he's as he's out there saying, well, what am I going to do? Oh, Heart of the Storm coming. Okay, let's check that out. And he's, oh wow, this is great. There's a pro circuit. I'm going to go compete. Like that. That's the whole thing. So you got to have it ingrained. And also, I'll be honest with you. My point of view on it is, if you're not putting in the time, you're doing yourself a disservice. Right? Like, it can't just be about the check. There's got to be a certain degree of pride. It's got to be that you want to hold that trophy up and say that on this day I was the best in the world. And that's tomorrow. I think, with our championship match, StarCraft 2. This is the most loaded tournament we've ever seen in terms of skill. Whoever raises that trophy will be the best player in the world on that day. And then the next game they play, if they don't win, they're no longer the best in the world. But for that day, I think they'll be able to say that. And that's a skill and pride thing. It's like, you have the skill, but do you have the pride to put in the work? Does it matter enough to you? I don't think that's I honestly, if there are underprepared players coming to this event, I can't imagine. That would shock me. It would just shock me. Well, again, so I think with MLG Live, the goal is to have not just competition, but also the shoulder programming that you'd see. So when you think of, if you're a football fan, you think of the NFL, you think of the pregame show, you think of the halftime show, you think of ESPN talking for an entire week about whether or not a quarterback is hurt, or there's all of these things, components that are put out there as support. So with MLG Live, the idea is that you have a platform for competition, but you also have a platform for hosted shows. You have a place where we can continue the dialogue with fans of the things that we do. But it's really a placeholder, right? It's a placeholder for more live competition. It's a placeholder for us to do things like the Global Invitational, but even different than that. Because what we really want to do is, as fans, is we want to see the activity. We want to see people play in meaningful matches. So next year we'll be doing a lot more with it on the competition side of things, and you'll be seeing a lot more coming out of it. But it's a work in progress, but it's one that is, as a sports media and entertainment business, you've got to be constantly creating media and constantly trying to give people entertaining things to watch, and that's really what the inspiration for it was. But I think in December we're going to be making some of the announcements. Just looking at Katie because this is the one she's like, don't say anything. We've gotten a lot of it sorted. There's a lot of stuff in the works. People have been piecing together hints and little things that I've said that I wasn't supposed to, or tweets that I've made, or I think the big thing is that we wanted this national championship to be a close to this season and to be an opportunity for everybody to celebrate the year that we've had and the games that we're playing. And we were toying with announcing things and making a big, hey, but I think we'd rather wait. I think we'd rather kind of get through this, let everybody enjoy the weekend, and then, we'll come out with the announcements for next year on their own. It seemed forced. I mean, I don't want to yeah, there's a lot of people watching, but the information, once it's out there, everybody will have it. It's not about me delivering it. It's about it getting out there and people, having enough time to plan for it. But the changes are pretty exciting to me, and I think that, of course, there will always be people who complain, but I think that people will be pretty happy with the direction we're going. Well, I think the structure of what we are and what we do is going to shift a bit in the next year. So meaning that we'll always be about providing a competition platform, right, for the best players in the world to play the games that they play. The media that we create around that, the way it's distributed, the way it's packaged, where it lands, it's going to shift pretty dramatically in some ways. But I think you'll see a lot more of the stuff that you've seen this year out of us in terms of competition, the structure around those competitions, where they're held, how they're presented is going to shift. But then you'll see events just like this, probably a little bit bigger, with a little bit more going on. Because I think what we need to do is, we need the activity to be extended a bit. We need more, meaning we need more of it happening, not the season, right? So 18 days spread out over 10 months, it's just not enough. So somewhere in between, complete oversaturation and 18 days, there's a number, a healthy number, where people are seeing those guys, and those guys are becoming bigger stars, and the communities are growing and driving the activity even more. And so I think we've circled a number. We've circled an amount of competition that we'd like to have next year, and a season structure and format that I think we'll support all of that. So it's pretty exciting. But then long term, I don't yet know what the end game will be in terms of what does an MLG season look like in 20 years. I couldn't tell you right now. But I know that it will be built on what we've done this year.